Hi guys. So I want to talk today about how and why the music industry is rigged, but there are a couple of caveats I'd like to add to this. One is there are exceptions to most rules, and this rule is no exception. There are a lot of ways or instances in which this is not true. This general sort of idea, and there are many good things I think about the music industry today. And it could be a lot worse, and I do understand that, but I think the more important thing is that it could be so much better, and I think that's more worthwhile to focus on for the most part. That we should kind of strive to improve, and I think overall things aren't in a great place for music, in a lot of ways for artists in general, and for consumers of art or enjoyers of art. So you've probably heard the terms Nepo baby and industry plant, right? These are increasingly common. I think the idea of Nepo baby is like more prevalent these days than industry plant. I think a few years ago we were all obsessed with the idea of industry plants, and that's kind of gone away a bit, and now it's all about Nepo babies. And I think part of that is because that ties into a kind of class issue, and it's a political thing, and you know, understandably it's a thing that does just make people angry, and it's something that's kind of in some form or another always made people angry, right? Like rich kids or people who were born into rich families benefiting from this, from the kind of like, you know, legacy of their great grandparents or their parents or whoever it is. They kind of benefit from those things, and it feels like they're cheating. It feels like they're kind of breaking the rules of the game that you're forced to comply with. So understandably that annoys people. And I mean, it's annoying for other reasons, because you know, you don't really want art to all come from the same types of people. And not only that, but generally, you know, people like to see and hear things that come from people who've maybe had to overcome difficulties in some way. And the fact that you're born into a rich family doesn't mean you haven't had to overcome difficulties. It doesn't mean that whatsoever. You know, we're all mortal. We all have loved ones who can die. We can all end up miserable and suicidal and or suffer abuse, you know, sexual abuse, physical abuse, whatever it is. Like being born into a rich family, and a rich family that makes it, you know, easier for you to succeed in life, that doesn't necessarily mean that your life has been great or you haven't had to struggle. But anyway, so yeah, there is absolutely a class aspect to this, and to the one of the many problems that we have in the music industry today, a huge class kind of issue, but it is a bit deeper than that as well. There's a bit more to it than that. So the class aspect, well, what I've noticed in the last 10 to 15 years is that the music industry has become predominantly two types of people. One is rich kids, the other is like drug dealers, basically. And if you think about it, almost everyone who's like under 30, who's kind of emerging in music now, they're kind of one of those two things. They're either rich kids or drug dealers, or they're people who somehow have the kind of support and backing of like a kind of an entire town or city where people just love them there for some reason. And again, yeah, I mean, there are exceptions, but basically like lower middle class or working class people are pretty hard to find in music these days. They don't really exist. Even just like kind of ordinary middle class people, it's not as common. It's even pretty difficult, I think, for them, for us, I should say. I fall into that category. I'm not from first of all, I'm not from the kind of background where like my family could like afford to bankroll me, and also I'm just not a person who would ever accept that anyway. So I've never taken like anything really from my family, apart from like you know, like if we've wanted to rent an apartment and they've asked for rent up front or something, I've like borrowed money, but I've never A, had the capacity, or B, the desire to be like, daddy, pay for my career. You know, to me it would be like completely humiliating. So and I think most people I know who are of my sort of background, even, like, yes, some of them, if it looked like they really had something promising going for them, or maybe if they were just kind of like a brat and they didn't really, because, like, for example, now, like, there's a lot, like, there's a lot going on. I don't want to be too specific, but there's a lot going on in my family, and, you know, someone's quite ill, and, like, we don't know, like, you know, it could potentially sort of wipe out, like, everything that we have. It probably won't, depending on, you know, what options we go with and what path we take kind of medically, but it you know, that's always a possibility. There's always the possibility of, like, sort of losing everything. So unless you're, like, mega rich, it's not really sensible or realistic to just like bankroll a kind of like failing project that doesn't make any money. It's pretty ludicrous. A different story if you've got like a business or you've got something else. And what is 100% a fact, the part that is much easier in life in general for me, is I know I can never end up like homeless. Like, that's impossible. In a couple of generations we could end up just like with fuck all, but for me, no, like, I can't end up homeless, and that my rock bottom is higher than a lot of people's rock bottom, basically, because I could always just go and stay with someone and whatever, like, you know, that isn't an issue. So that in a sense means I can take like more risks in life. But what I have seen, and what is very different, is people whose parents essentially say, yeah, we'll pay for you to live in Barcelona or New York or London, we'll pay for your place, we'll pay for your, you know, we'll pay for your rent, we'll give you money for food and stuff, you just do whatever you need to do to live there, to stay there, to do gigs, to network, have other people around, they can stay at your flat, you can be everybody's best buddy, because you can say, oh yeah, you can come and stay at my place. When you do a show, you can stay around mine after. I'll buy the Coke, you know, like, you can be everybody's best pal. You can live in a really expensive city. You don't have to work. Most crucially, not having to work is the most important part, really. And that is so much more common than people realise. Like, and if you know anyone who's been around, who's gigged and stuff in like big cities, like major cities, you know, the ones that everybody wants to live in. I'm not really talking the sort of third and fourth cities in a country. I'm talking the ones that everybody, you know, like I said, LA, London, Barcelona, New York, Berlin, all these types of places. If you know anyone who's like gigged there and been around musicians and stuff, ask them, because it's nowadays in particular, it's crazy. Like, virtually all of these people don't have jobs. There's no fucking money in music, really. I mean, there's like absolutely fuck all. They don't have jobs, and I'm not attacking these people, but I don't even think there's anything particularly wrong with it. It's a, you know, it's a sort of case of like, don't hate the player, hate the game. Like the system and the situation is fucked. I think there are people involved who are much more culpable than these kind of rich kids. And another thing I'd like to point out is many of whom are very talented. Like, it's not to say that they're not talented. Many of them are. There are a lot of bands in the last few years who've come out who are clearly all like sort of poshos, and clearly, you know, have had a fairly relaxed time of making it in music, and they're great bands, you know. Like, a lot of them are not. A lot of it is shit. But and there's a lot of amazing music that we miss out on because these people just can't, you know, people who don't have those kind of opportunities, they can't afford to live in those places, they can't afford to do those things, they have to have a job, they have to have a day job, and that's that. I mean, I've generally had to have jobs. Like, for a while I didn't, because I was in a crazy living situation with my girlfriend, basically, so extremely complicated to explain. But she earns quite well, and so for a while I didn't. But generally, particularly for the last, I don't know how many years, but for years, I've generally had to work. And Can I say that's had an enormous impact? Not really in my case, like, because I don't really need like huge amounts of time to work on stuff, and I don't really like to, because I don't play an instrument. There's not something I really need to like practice in that way, and I'm not really that way inclined anyway. It's more about writing and lyrics and stuff, and sort of feeling inspired. So for me, that's not the main thing. For me, the main thing is like not living in a city, and not having money to put into things, not having money to put into promoting myself, not living in London or Madrid or Barcelona or wherever it is. And that's kind of a choice, to be honest. I've kind of opted for like a more kind of to prioritize like a future of like having a family and stuff, and I'm kind of over all the music shit in some respects now. But yeah, if you can live in one of these cities and not have a job and have disposable income, it's a cheat code for success. I mean, you're so much better placed than anybody else. You know, it would be the same with anything. If you want to be like an Olympic athlete or something, you know, and you have to work a 9 to 5 or worse just to pay the bills, and you're knackered every day when you come home, and you can't be bothered to do anything, and you don't have the money to, you know, you don't have access to training facilities or whatever it is, or to do all of this shit, then you're extremely unlikely to be successful. So yeah, there's that. And that is a huge portion of the music industry. As I said, there's the other thing, which is kind of like drug dealers, which, you know, you can spot them a mile away. They don't try to hide what they are. The posh kids and the sort of nepo babies, they do hide what they are. They try very hard, and they talk in like weird Mockney accents and stuff. You'll notice them. They try to sort of act like sort of rougher than they are, you know, and they talk in weird voices. But you know, really, you can kind of spot them a mile away, especially if you've been around them and you know them, and you're sort of from that kind of background yourself. But the drug dealers, I mean, they literally say it in every fucking song, and like hold up piles of money and shit. So you can kind of figure out where they're getting their disposable income from, and where they're getting the sort of money and influence to promote their music and to do things. And in both cases, it leads to extremely, not exclusively, but often extremely poor quality music being disproportionately successful. So there are probably a lot of people who grow up in the same communities as these guys, who are like drug dealers holding up stacks of money and pouring like all their, you know, dirty money that they don't have any use for into paying for videographers and editors and mix engineers and promo and placement in blogs and magazines and all the other shit you need, and even doing probably pay to play a lot of the time. There's people who probably grow up in those same communities who haven't chosen that path, who, you know, are of more sort of modest means, who are like amazingly talented, but you go on one of their songs, the mix sounds like shit, they haven't got a music video, they look like crap because, you know, they're poor and they're not into like fashion or whatever. They don't have anyone promoting it, so it has like 7 views and you never hear it, and if you did, to be honest, it probably wouldn't grab your attention enough. And these days we don't give anything more than like, you know, 3.5 seconds. So you just go, whatever, this is boring and shit, and close it. And you wouldn't stop to go, actually, considering this guy seems to have done this himself and doesn't have access to all the same means and the same like flashy videos as these like drug dealer guys, this is actually very good, and the writing is very good, and maybe if more people listen to this, he might make some money, and if he made some money, he might be able to put a bit more into it, and he also might have more confidence, and he might have, you know, if he grew as an artist and the overall production quality went up, this would be really good. You know, we aren't tuned in to think like that. And the crazy thing is, I see this because I make music myself, and yet I still, and I hate it, you know, I hate the whole thing, but I still see these like videos where it's, I mean, it's like how many songs do we need about a guy who's like the toughest drug dealer and gangster? It's like, okay, I think we've heard this now. I think we've seen all the toughest drug dealers and gangsters. I think we've heard enough of this. But I still click on them, and I'm still like, fucking hell, man, what the fuck? Oh, is that like a rescue helicopter? I don't even know. Get the fuck away from me, bro. Right over my fucking head. I fucking hate helicopters, man. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, fucking hate them. So low, above my head. Anyway, we've seen it all. We know, like, and I still click on this shit, and I'll be like, oh, who's this guy? He's got a different weird, wacky name and crazy visuals and some bullshit. Because it's like, it's clickbait, it's attention grabbing, it's stimulating, it's got, you know, good production values, and money was put into it. Money was put into making sure you saw it. Money was put into making sure it was well mixed, well edited, and everything else. And it just grabs your attention, because a lot of time and money was put into making it do so. And if I'm like that, as someone who actually to some degree understands the problem, what's the average consumer like, you know? And what I've noticed is the average consumer doesn't have any idea what it takes to make something. So there's a lot of people, and not all of them are rich kids, but Matt, you would be surprised. You would be surprised as well how many of the guys who act like kind of gangsters, how many of them are actually rich kids. That's the most surprising thing. And when you start to see that, you can't really unsee it as well. A lot of London rappers, guys who seem like kind of like street guys, not like, I'm not talking super heavy street guys where every song's about killing people. I'm talking guys who act a little bit street. Guys who kind of act like, yeah, I'm kind of about that, but I'm also like an artist and I also do other stuff and I talk about this and that. And they kind of obscure what they are. The amount of those guys who go to private schools, who are rich kids, is quite shocking. But basically, like, it's not just that. There are also, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's this idea of like industry plants, and an industry plant doesn't have to be. Generally, they are people who come from rich families, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be someone who's got backing from a label, but they're not overt about it. So the basically in the 2000s it became cool, the idea of like organic success online, because it did exist for a little while on MySpace and stuff. There really was this thing, like when the internet came out, the music industry didn't have control over it. So the mixtape era of rap, I mean, you listen to some of that stuff now, it sounds like fucking shit, but I have a lot of nostalgia for it. And it was really fun. There was a lot of character. Music didn't sound good at that time, I don't think. I think it was like among the worst music sounded, because it wasn't being made in a proper, you know, old school kind of studio, good analog equipment. But we also knew fuck all about mixing, and there were very few people who could actually do it well, and we didn't have all these AI tools and all these people offering to do, you know, $10 mixes and stuff on the internet. So a lot of it was like, when you listen now, it's like one, you know, uploaded to YouTube in like 144p and shit. It sounds like fucking dog shit. Sorry about all the traffic noise. But it was a cool, exciting time. And then there were a lot of these bands that would put random tunes on MySpace, and someone would put it on their MySpace profile as the embedded song, and it would like blow up. And then early days of SoundCloud as well. This was happening, and it was real, and it was really cool. And there was such a thing as organic success, and there still is. But the vast majority of organic success of like underground artists is absolute bollocks. It's not that at all. It's a complete lie. So, but because that did exist, and we kind of, as consumers, I know some people don't like this word, consumers of art. I think who cares. But as consumers of art, as I'll call them, we feel we're almost the custodians of this, and the kind of arbiters of it. Like we kind of, through our will and through our tastes and through how we feel, we dictate what is or isn't organic success. So it's something that kind of belongs to us as the consumers, not so much as the artists, and it gives us a feeling of collective agency in terms of what becomes popular in music. So we like this idea. It's a very marketable and appealing idea. And so at a certain point, I mean, I think, you know, around 2010 or so, like, still then it was kind of the Wild West online for music, but it was starting to change a bit, because instead of there being lots of random different blogs, people didn't want to go on, you know, 20 different blogs, and they wanted to go on a couple of like sort of centralized ones. And instead of there being lots of different outlets for music, it became again, like, things started to get more and more centralized. Then Spotify came along and found a solution to the sort of torrenting problem, because back then we were all just downloading music, which meant that if you're downloading it for free, a pop star's album has just as much value as some guy's mixtape. Like, so it was easier to kind of get shit going. And also, if you were someone who wasn't submitting takedown requests and all of this, and you were just bunging your stuff online for free, and you didn't have to worry about copyright because you were telling people to pirate your stuff anyway, then you were just as, in some ways you were better positioned than a mainstream artist, because the mainstream artist is trying to stop their stuff being leaked. You're happy for it to be leaked. And it's not like Spotify, where you do have to pay a little bit of attention to what's I know it's ridiculous, by the way, maybe it's just like an irrational phobia, but I fucking hate when they fly over my head. I'm not like this about everything. I just really, really fucking hate having these things above my head all the fucking time. It's like I have like intrusive thoughts about it, like fucking falling from the sky and crushing me. So it was advantageous in a lot of ways. It was a really cool time in many ways for music, and a horrible time for the music industry. Numbers were like, sale numbers were plummeting, earnings were plummeting, and then streaming came along, and at the same time these blogs, a lot of them, you know, they're being approached by people at parties who are going, look, I've got this album or this band I'm in, what would it take, you know, for you to write about us? And they're going, I'm not really supposed to do this, but maybe like $5,000. And they're like, $5,000? And they're like, okay, $2,000. And they're like, okay, we'll put you in the little like featured section or something, and I won't tell my editor. I'll just tell him that I think you guys are really fucking good. Maybe you can put a video out and I'll put that on there, and you can pay me when your video's out, as long as it's good, blah, blah, blah. And then they develop a relationship with those people, and then they might develop a relationship with people associated with those people. They might develop a relationship with the label that person belongs to. Then you get to a point where so many people are contacting these blogs and websites and magazines that you can't just contact them. Like, try emailing your music to Pitchfork. They don't look at your fucking email. They can't. They actually can't. I mean, that's not their fault. They can't look at your email. It would be literally impossible. Like, the manpower is not there to look for all these fucking emails. And let's face it, most of the stuff people send them is like terrible. That is one of the problems, is that so many people who are like awful are sort of clogging up the music sphere. And now with all the fucking AI shit, but I don't even want to fucking get into that. I can't even be bothered, and it's too depressing. I don't really know enough about it. But anyway, it then became you have to have some sort of agency who contacts them for you, who knows, basically they know someone there, and they'll contact them for you. And there are various requirements to be part of this agency. Usually you have to pay. And so essentially, either way, you're paying, basically. You have to pay. Most people in music, by the way, obviously aren't making money. Most people are losing money, from what I can see. The amount of money that goes into paying for these agencies, paying for promo, paying for videos, paying for mixing, it's an enormous investment that generally has very little in terms of return. The only way I've got to get off this fucking section, man. I can't barely hear myself think. So it's not normally like this. I don't know what the fuck's going on today. It's mad. So much traffic. It's because of the bank holiday, and they're doing like helicopter training. It's driving me nuts. But anyway, most of it, you're just pouring money into a black hole, which is why for these rich kids, where the money isn't really an issue, they're not really worried about making money from it. They want attention, which is, fine, most people want attention, but they also want recognition. They want people to think they're great, they want to be cool, or they really care about their art, Like, because I think it's important not to dehumanize someone just because they're like rich or whatever. You know, a lot of them like really care about what they're doing, and as I said, like a lot of them are very good artists. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them are shit, but a lot of them are really good artists. Or a lot of them are only really good because they have people doing half of it for them, or they have, a lot of the time they have people doing even more of it than you realize, like writing. You'd be surprised as well how many people pay people to write shit for them, and oh, it's mad. And in rap, that's what a lot of these drug dealers do. They make a bunch of money from crime, and they go, right, I've got like 30 grand in cash here. Can I pay some guy to write songs for me that would be successful? And they pay some fucking ugly, boring guy who's like never going to be successful in music because he's like, oh, I like to write songs. And they pay him, and he writes them a tune that's huge, and then they stand there like looking all cool or whatever and sell the song. And it works, and they haven't written any of it, and people are like, oh, this dog is mad, bro. He's so big. Fucking hell. Glad he's behind that. Jesus Christ. Fuck me, he's big. Oh my lord. You wouldn't want to scrap with him, would you? Pray that fence holds. Can you see him? Yeah, there he is. Oh, alright. There's peril everywhere today, guys. I can't fucking... Okay, I'm going to go round the other way on the way back. This is pissing me off. The dog's not, to be fair, but when it's the dog, the helicopter, the 900 cyclists, the fucking motorway levels of traffic. Oh. If only my music had this much traffic, eh? If only there was this much traffic making it to my songs online. No, I'm genuinely fucking over that, to be honest. I mean, I am biased here, like, you know, kind of everything I'm saying. I do have a personal bias. It's not really a kind of active bias, or it's not one that, none of this really affects me now, to be honest. Like, I'm sort of, genuinely, like, I am kind of over it. But definitely it has informed my perspective over the years, my own disappointment and regret and sort of anger, to be honest. A lot of times it's anger and sadness. Fucking tell you, man, I can't hear a fucking... It's normally the quietest road. I did that, the last video I uploaded was this road, and you barely heard a fucking peep. It's just the bank holiday. So anyway, yeah, so most people, they don't really, hang on, let me restart this in case the battery runs out. Yeah, so most people, they don't really know, understandably, because it's, you know, in the same way if I see a plumbed kitchen, I don't know what fucking went into it. I don't know how much money it cost. I don't know how much time it took to do all of that, because I'm not a fucking plumber. Like, I don't really know. And I could, if I really thought about it, I could go, oh, this looks like this would take a while, and I wonder how they did this. I could, if I thought about it, but, you know, I don't really have the time to do so, and I'm kind of busy and whatever. So it'd be great if I did. It'd be great if I had more empathy for the plumber, but, you know, it's understandable why I wouldn't. And the same applies to music. When people see a video, it makes me laugh when you see these artists and they're the whole style, the way they dress, the way they talk, the way they're marketed, the way they're spoken about, the way the fake comments they put on the videos, the whole thing is designed. What, have I done something? Like, are they fucking... It's like they just make a beeline for my fucking head every time. I'm going nuts here, bro. Fuck off. Honestly, go away, man. They're so annoying. The whole thing is designed... I should just fucking give up on the video. The whole thing is designed to create this image of an underground kind of organic, like, oh, you're not listening to pop. No, you're listening to a small artist. Look, someone who has a video produced with 10 credits on it, and they have a DOP and a director and an editor and a mix engineer and a mastering engineer, and they're all established enough to be credited, and they have, oh, I'm fucking breathing in clouds of dust. This is just, the world doesn't want me to make this video. It's too powerful. I'm dropping too much powerful knowledge for all of you today. Yeah, so fucking hell, I think we're safe now. I'm on this nice dirt path. Fuck me. Away from it all. Fucking headache. The idea is to put into your head, yeah, you're you're one of the select few who's kind of like, you've got the taste to see, and you don't listen to pop, you listen to underground artists. The funny thing is, sometimes this extends literally to people who have like millions of views, and people are like, one day he'll blow up. I think he has, I think he's in the top 0.01%. But also, yeah, even people who are like quite a lot smaller than that, we're talking people who have 10k views or whatever, when they've got all of this shit, like when the video looks amazing, unless you can visibly, basically, if the video looks great and it's a really cool video, but you can see that it was cheap, and you can see that it was made with it took a lot of time, and there was not much money put into it, and there's not a whole team that made it, then yeah, it's probably legit. But when the video looks like a movie, and this artist is sort of marketing themselves as kind of underground or a smaller artist, it's complete bollocks. Like, you can these days, like, obviously phone cameras are really good and a lot of people have them, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who, once a month or more, they put out like a high quality video with like really good cinematography, really good editing, perfectly color graded, looks great, fits the music, the songs are mixed perfectly, songs are mastered perfectly. Sure, some people can just do that, like without having backing, without having a budget, without having a whole team, without being able to pay $1,000 a pop to make one of these things. Some people can. To do so at that speed, at that rate, at that consistency, whilst doing shows, whilst doing other shit, whilst promoting themselves with like stupid TikToks every day, it's not really possible. It's not reliably possible. It's possible in some cases, and there are some people who just do amazing things and who are really hardworking, really skilled and focused, and just fucking get shit done, and that's amazing. I mean, it's all the more amazing because it's very difficult to be, in some ways, to be an organic success today. The people who do it purely off the back of their quality, not because they're a character on social media, not because they're attractive, not because they just got lucky or whatever, but the people who do it purely through quality and hard work are amazing, like genuinely amazing, because it's that much harder. To be fair, if you did it in 2010, it might have just been because you were quite good, and then you sort of got your foot in the door then, and you've managed to stay in or whatever. But if you do it now, yeah, I mean, what you've done is amazing, because it's so hard. So yeah, people, I think, don't realise what goes into it, and I would get frustrated a lot. And to be fair, like, some of this is I wasn't right to gripe about, and some of it, sometimes I would use problems like this myself. They're obviously doing fucking training today. I would use problems like this as a kind of excuse for myself, and I didn't realise I was doing that. But I was focusing too much on what was wrong with the system and what was wrong with how other people were receiving what I was doing, rather than what I was doing wrong or what I could have done differently. But that doesn't mean that these kinds of grievances weren't valid whatsoever. I'll give you an example, right? In football management, if you're a fan of football, English football, the only football, there are managers who manage kind of shittier teams, who have like smaller budgets, and when they do shit wrong, when they're Pep Guardiola, right? If you follow Manchester City, Pep Guardiola basically has had a bottomless pit of money for like a decade at Manchester City, and whenever a player hasn't worked out, they just can them and they sign a player, for another 100 million or whatever. And it means that any of his shortcomings as a manager, any of his mistakes haven't really been exposed, because it's a way more forgiving environment. Whereas other managers would buy that player that doesn't work out, and they're stuck with them, and then they finish second, and you go, yeah, it's because you relied on this guy who was your signing, so you made that mistake. Yes, they did make that mistake, but the fact is, Pep Guardiola made the same mistake, but he had the money, or financial doping, capabilities, perhaps, to cover for that mistake. to make up for it. And so his mistakes are forgiven much more easily. And when you fail, your mistakes become much more obvious. It's much easier to look and to say, oh no, this is why, because you did this wrong or you did that wrong. When people succeed, you don't really look at what they did wrong because there isn't really a reason to, and your attention isn't drawn to it. But that doesn't mean these people aren't making the exact same mistakes, or that they aren't in a privileged enough position where it's not really possible for them to make that mistake. So an example I would give, an example I would sieve is, like, a lot of my stuff over the years has been like very badly mixed, and part of that is because I'm like kind of a control freak. I don't really trust people with it. I don't really like to sort of send it to people, and I've kind of always wished someone did it for me, but in my head I was waiting until I had, like, you know, someone had figured what a fucking generational talent I was and been like, we're giving Rick Rubin and his whole team, you know, we're assigning them to your next project. And I'd be like, perfect, yeah, that's what I was waiting for. Cheers, guys. Any day now. I was expecting this any minute now, and here we are. Okay, about time, chaps. And I was kind of waiting until I could, like, you know, someone who I really trusted and who really had, you know, who really knew what they were doing could kind of take over all of that for me, because I've always known, like, it's not my forte, it's not something I like doing, it's something I kind of hate, but I didn't really want to just like pay some bloke, and secondarily I didn't have the money to, basically. I never had the money to pay for that. Again, I mean, like, if I'd been like the world's biggest tyrant and like bully, yeah, technically there's the money in my sort of like familial or social circle. I could have literally been like, I want it, I'm gonna kill myself, you know. I could have done, technically, I guess, but I was never going to do that, and it would be absurd, and it would be a huge waste of money, and just a huge lack of respect for that money. And I don't even know if I could have done, to be honest, to pay regularly for someone to like do shit like that. No, I don't think so. So I never really, and I didn't have a job that paid well, and sometimes I was working part-time because I just wanted to do music, you know. And all my jobs were like minimum wage and shit. So no, I didn't have the. And my girlfriend earned quite well, but at that time, to be fair, she did like to sort of spend money quite a lot. So there wasn't any spare money kicking around, put it that way, you know. And I was like using Logitech speakers to mix my stuff for years, or just mixing on cheap, shitty headphones in an untreated, tiny room, and with very little knowledge of what I was doing. I was trying, but, you know, yeah, I probably should have gotten good at delegating. I think that's like probably like the number one skill in business, is being good at delegating and managing people and stuff, but I didn't, and that is a way in which I failed. But it did annoy me when people would sort of turn their noses up like, oh, the mix is shit, and then they'd listen to some other artist who either had a label or who, again, was like, had a lot of financial backing. I listen to that and be like, oh yeah, this is awesome, I love supporting smaller artists. And I'd be like, no, you don't really like the sound of someone who's actually unsuccessful, because it's not generally that polished, it's not that well mixed, they often are quite raw. And I'm using myself as an example, but I'm an imperfect example of this, and there's obviously personal bias, so, you know, to some degree forget that example, but like the actual sound of someone who is genuinely, like, usually it's like, as I say, they're quite raw in a lot of ways, not just in terms of the production quality, but often in terms of what they're actually doing. Like, they often don't know that much what they're doing because they're not around other people, and they don't necessarily have the confidence, or they haven't been doing it that long, they're not super experienced, but they have like some kind of raw talent that doesn't, to most people's ears, doesn't sound good. Most people don't understand what that is, myself included. Like, it's hard to listen out for it because we're not really tuned into that anymore. So people think they like the sound of a small underground. No, think about it, right? Most of the stuff that you listen to that's from a, quote, smaller artist, it sounds exactly the same as someone, because there's not that much difference between paying like $300 for a mix or paying $3,000, there isn't really that much difference. There's not really an audible difference to the average person. So most of it pretty much sounds just as good. You know, it sounds good on all devices. It's well EQ'd. The mastering's done just right. You know, they've got a proper mastering engineer who actually understands how to make something loud without crushing it and destroying the sound, which is something I've never gotten the hang of. And so there's not that much difference. So then where is the downside? What we're hearing is not rough. What we're hearing is virtually the same kind of quality. Yeah, maybe they can't pay for an orchestra, these kind of industry plant type artists, or these people who are on relatively small labels but still labels enough to give them, you know, good enough financial backing to pretty much do what they want. Yeah, they can't pay for a fucking feature from Rihanna. They can't pay for an orchestra. But apart from that, there's a lot of ways in which their means aren't that different from like a huge artist. There's only so many things you can put in a music video, and yeah, you can make some massive grandiose like spectre, but like people don't really necessarily always like that anyway. And yeah, so what I mean to say is that most of the time when people hear someone's music who's actually like a raw talent, like a diamond in the rough, as they would say, it's not that person who has a DOP and a mix engineer and a mastering engineer, and you know, they still dress in shabby clothes and act like they're kind of rough around the edges, and that they aren't connected or whatever. That's not what that is. That's someone who's already on their way. The person who's like a diamond in the rough, usually they have like 12 views of plays on SoundCloud or whatever. You have to kind of listen. You have to actually kind of listen to see what's good about it. It's not always immediately pleasurable. It's not always immediately enjoyable, which is also a kind of a separate issue with music now. But the disposable nature of it means stuff that grows on you doesn't really exist anymore. And a lot of the best music is stuff that grows on you. I would give the example, for example, of Captain Beefheart. I've never gotten into Captain Beefheart, but it's very well known and frequently stated that Trout Mask Replica is an album you have to listen to a lot of times. There's a lot of quotes from different people who are, you know, sort of famous fans of that music. I think Matt Groening is one of them, the Simpsons guy. As if you don't know who Matt Groening is. You know, he made The Simpsons. You know The Simpsons? Yeah, he did that show. You know, have you seen The Simpsons? Have you heard of The Simpsons? Yeah, I think Matt Groening's one of them. There's a bunch of people who sort of, you know, famously love that album. And they all describe the same thing, that they bought it, they put it on, and they were like, what the fuck is this shit? But then because they'd paid money for it, they then had to, they were like, well, let me try it again. I'm not going to throw it in the bin. I've got it here. I'm bored of all my other CDs. So they bung it on again. And then they said the second time they were like, I still don't like it, but I'm kind of intrigued. And then they would listen to it like 20 or 30 times. And then by the time they got to like, you know, 30 listens, they were like, wow, this is amazing, you know? And then it becomes their favourite album and they're obsessed with it. I never persevered that much. Partially, again, because I didn't need to, because I could just move on to something else. This is kind of a separate issue. There are artists I've listened to who grow on you. Death Grips would be one for me where, like, but the thing is with Death Grips is some of their songs, you don't need them to grow on you. Some of them are really instantly enjoyable, and there's a lot of visual stimulation going on, and a lot of stuff that just intrigues you in other ways, with the visuals, with the nature of the band, with the mystery they create, with all sorts of things that kind of draw you in, and then you end up listening loads of times anyway, and then you sort of grow to really like songs that you wouldn't normally like at first. But generally speaking, in a sort of Spotify landscape where you don't even see the artist, you don't even really know who it is you're listening to a lot of the time, you've got the like your For You playlist on or whatever, and you're just like, nah, I don't like this song, skip. You don't have any time to get to know the artist, what they're about. So much of music is so anonymous now and boring and devoid of character, and it's hard to tell, is it the music or is it us? Is it the way we're consuming it? And I know for a fact some of it is the way we're consuming it. I think some stuff is not as good now anyway, because even those of us who make it, we're like a lot more distracted. People aren't really in a flow state as much anymore, I think, because like we're all like addicted to the internet and shit, and the world is just weird and things just feel weird. I don't know, things don't feel quite right. I think they're getting better at the moment. I think we're on a very slight upward trend, but things haven't felt great for a while in the world. and not in a way that's cool or exciting either. It's not like Bad Times in a way that's kind of fun, or things just don't feel very good. It's hard to enjoy things, to be honest. Like, it's hard to enjoy art and music and movies. I think a lot of people are actually losing interest in music, but part of this might be why, because they're not developing as much of an attachment with the stuff they're listening to. This is kind of a separate but adjacent issue. But the main issue, again, is the stuff that's already doing well is the stuff that continues to do well. And people who don't have those opportunities, they're not really... It's like another football analogy. Football is extremely accessible. If you're good at football, people will probably find out quite quickly. And there are people, Jamie Vardy and N'Golo Kante and people like this who kind of slip through the cracks. Ian Wright. But Didier Drogba. I could name these players all day, but it's a bit redundant. But it happens, but it's very rare in football, like incredibly rare, because it's so accessible. And someone will probably see you, like, playing somewhere for a very small team, and they'll go, wow, he's way better than this team. Let's, whatever. Whereas, like Formula One, for example, the fact is, I don't know who's the best now, it's like probably not Lewis Hamilton anymore. I don't follow Formula One. How many people have tried Formula One in their lives? Like, what percentage of people have tried Formula One compared to football? It's obviously less than 1%, right? Like, most of us got to kick a football around, and if we were good at it, we probably would have figured it out. What percentage of us would know even? You might be like an amazing Formula One driver, and no one would fucking know, and you wouldn't know. You might, when you drive your own car, be like, I'm a pretty fucking good driver, but you've never really, been tested in that way. So we don't really know who the best Formula One drivers are. And I think music at one point was a bit closer to football. Say probably more like tennis. I don't think it was ever like football in that respect. Maybe more like, tennis, where there was a reasonable expectation. If you were likely to be good at this, we might find out. And it's becoming kind of more like Formula One, where it's like most of the talent, most of the greatest talent is probably hidden from us because they don't have the access, they don't have the means to grow that talent, to nurture it, to promote it, to expand upon it, to do whatever. There are, as I said, there are many exceptions, and kudos to those people for managing that. It happens for sure. So I think another part of the problem is that these magazines and blogs, as I said, I mean, so many of them, they're just paying, honestly. Like, people just pay to be in them. But not even just them. There's a kind of industrial complex around music, around alternative music. And again, alternative music is sort of not really alternative anymore. The line between alternative music and mainstream music is so blurred that a lot of smaller, I'm using that term as well, but a lot of medium-sized artists are taking a huge amount of influence from like mainstream pop, and a lot of pop artists are a lot more sort of alternative and weird. The kind of like Billie Eilish effect, where it's like not like the pop music. It used to be like pop music was like like doing all these moves, and then alternative music was like now it's not like that. Now it's like everyone's kind of the same, on the surface at least, in a superficial sense. Everyone is. And there's a kind of industrial complex around alternative music anyway, in quotes, alternative music, and it extends even to YouTube channels. A lot of, this is again probably my personal bias here, my own sort of bitterness, but there are all these channels who talk about this music, and they would be like, today in this video I'm going to be breaking down why JPEG Mafia's music is so special. It's like, okay, he's quite a big artist. I think anyone who's into experimental rap knows who JPEG Mafia is. I don't think it's that important to sort of promote his music, or that interesting. And I think if you need someone to explain why it's good to you, I mean, why do you just listen to it? So it's a shame that a lot of this stuff is centered around kind of like ball washing people who are already successful and already have stuff going for them, and already definitely have got their heads above the parapet enough for like people to find out about them, instead of finding stuff that we can't find, that we don't have the taste to find. So I understand why the average consumer struggles with this. I struggle with it even as a musician. But like, if you're a music journalist, shouldn't that kind of be your job? Like, obviously, yeah, you've got to review the big stuff, the stuff that people care about, the stuff that gets clicks. I get that. But shouldn't there be like much more of a place as well for them to go, look, I found this thing. It's like, for example, if you're a football scout, I don't keep using football analogies, but they work. If you're a football scout and you're trying to scout new talent, you don't go, this guy Mbappe is really good. The club are like, we know Mbappe's good. We're talking about. You're meant to go, I found this guy in the French 3rd division. He's 17 and he kind of looks shit. But when you actually watch, he's actually like really good off the ball. And I think if we train him and if we work on his like physicality, I think he could be a really top player for a really good price. And they go, okay, we'll have a look. Because that's their job. That's why you pay a scout. Otherwise, you wouldn't pay a scout. You would just go, okay, who are the top players in the world? Well, we'll just sign them. The point of scouts is that they're better at this than everyone else. And I feel like with music journalism, with music critique, with content online about music, I'm trying to pick up the pace so I'm not picking up all this crosstalk here. I feel like that should be the case. I feel like, shouldn't that kind of be their job? Or at least there should be, to some degree, some kind of industry centered around that. Some kind of onus placed upon that. And there's not. And I don't know how seriously people take all these blogs and stuff anymore anyway. I mean, I know like Pitchfork, for example, it was a big deal and now it's kind of a joke and people hate it. And people kind of hate read it and like they don't really care. You might go on there once in a while and go, what's on there? But it's not really, I don't think it certainly doesn't have the same, it's not cool like it once was, But either way, because now it's all expanded and it's all kind of splintered. It's on YouTube, it's on different social media pages and all of this. But shouldn't that be what they do? Like, they show you stuff that you could never possibly find yourself, and where you really wouldn't kind of know that this stuff existed, and you probably wouldn't even persist with listening to it. But these people who do have the perseverance, who do have the knack for finding stuff, who do have that eye for quality, who can look beyond the production values, the immediacy of the song, the clickbait nature of it, all of this, and who do have the time, because it's their job, or their passion maybe in some cases, to dig a bit deeper. That should be a thing. I also think concurrently it would be good, I don't think there's any moral obligation here, it would be good if we, as the public, as consumers of music, or whatever you want to call them, we were a bit more tuned in that way. That we take Van Gogh, right, for example. We took Van Gogh to die and become a kind of posthumous success for people to actually realise that he was... Hang on, I'll stop and start, there's so much talking going on, hang on. It took Van Gogh to people, for some reason they stopped, they thought I was like filming them with my selfie stick. It was just distracting, just like standing still, like what's going on, why is he pointing it at us? I'm very clearly talking into it, ninnies. It took for Van Gogh to die, and it wasn't just that he died, a lot of fortuitous stuff happened after that, and then years later, after this bloke had like tried so earnestly and poured himself into this and made such brilliant works of art, years after he died, people were like, oh no, that's brilliant, and no, art doesn't have to look like this, it can look like this. And that's a very nice story in a way, but it's also kind of a horrible story because he lived a life of misery and pain and probably killed himself and was rejected constantly and was sort of told he wasn't good enough. And the lesson we should maybe have learned is like, we should pay a bit more attention maybe, because we get so much out of his works of art. They've inspired so many people and given us so much. But while he was alive, us, the public, obviously not the same people that are alive now, but essentially, just the art consuming public, were like, nah, he's rubbish. Get this guy away. His drawings look childish. What is this? A children's cartoon? And he was just completely, outright dismissed. People didn't really try to look deeper, and people at this time are, going to, I'm sure it was a very similar structure. There were the very famous guys in the big galleries, and there were the slightly less famous guys in the slightly smaller galleries. But either way, they were all part of the art establishment, and he wasn't. He just wasn't a part of that. And I'm not sure we learned our lesson, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm not sure that we see that as an important thing. I think we're so used to it all just being piped into our faces, whether it was by MTV when we were kids or by the internet now and by Spotify playlists and all of this. It all just gets piped into our ears, piped into our eyes, and we don't really have to take much control or responsibility or whatever over what we're consuming. And if we don't like it, we don't like it. That's it. Fine. That's all right. Again, I don't think there's like a moral obligation, but we are going to end up with what we've got, essentially, which is like a pyramid and a situation where the ones who are successful become more successful and the ones who are not at all successful will never be successful. And so much amazing talent is not nurtured, it's not seen, it's not validated. So a lot of these people, they just think, I'm a bum, forget it, no one cares, I must be shit. And they look, it's like with steroids, right? If you're a young guy and you're working out and you're trying to get fit, you're trying to get strong, and then you see a guy who's on steroids and he's like, oh no, I'm not on steroids, this is just hard work, bro. And he literally looks like a fucking Gears of War character. And you're like, oh, I'm fucking shit. Like, I'm a piece of shit. Because he's lying. It's because he's on steroids and he's lying to you. And he's lying to everyone because he's a loser who wants attention, basically. He's a loser who can't handle the idea that people know that he's on steroids. So instead, he lies, knowing, consciously or unconsciously, that that's going to make you feel worse about yourself. It's going to make you feel bad in comparison. And he does it anyway. Those people are weak losers, and the person who's not a weak loser, who's earnestly trying hard, gets made to feel like a weak loser. And the same thing happens with a lot of these smaller artists. They don't have the backing, they don't have network. By the way, another thing I forgot to mention in this video, they don't have friends. Like, they don't have a network. That's another hugely beneficial thing, to be a very social person who has lots of friends, who is in a big network of people, a big network of other artists. Some people are just, some people might be like autistic, or they just don't fit in well with other people. Generally, that's been the case for me. Like, I've never fit in well with other people, so that aspect was extremely difficult. That was another thing. But a lot of people have that problem. And so again, these people, they don't have certain things. What they do have, perhaps, is a huge amount of talent, but nothing else, basically. They just have the talent. They have fuck all else. And they think, no, I've only got this many plays, and people don't care, and people don't like my music, and people click on it and then click away and then turn it off. I must be shit, and I'm a failure, and I'm a loser. And they quit doing it, or they stop putting care into it. They stop trying, in the same way someone who thinks they're ugly, they stop making an effort with their appearance, they stop trying, they give up, they lose their confidence, they start wearing baggy clothes and, looking down at the floor. And people do that creatively, they stop, they give up because they feel, and you might say, okay, well, they've given up, it's their fault. Yeah, okay. But again, what we're prioritizing there is not just talent then, is it? We're not just nurturing talent, we're also saying, oh, you have to also be an incredibly hard worker, or incredibly driven, or a businessman, or a networker, or someone who just has unshakable self-confidence, maybe because your parents put that into you. You don't have a fear of failure, you think you're great, it doesn't matter what happens. There's all sorts of things. So yeah, that's why I think this issue in general, it goes way beyond class. There's a lot more to it. It's more complicated than that. That is a big factor. And that in itself is I'd say there's already a fairly decent awareness of that. Like, I think people can see that, when you see some actor who has the same last name as some other famous actor, and they're getting great roles and stuff, and all of this, we know that exists. We know Brooklyn Beckham is not a successful photographer because he's a good photographer. Have a look at Brooklyn Beckham's photographs if you haven't seen them, guys. Fucking hell. Oh man, that is like, that's to the point where I go, no, this is disrespectful. Like, I'm not one of those people who gets really worked up about it generally, because I go, fuck it, they're doing something they like doing, and they happen to have rich parents who can basically buy their way into the industry. What else are they going to do? Not do it? It seems a bit unreasonable to expect that. But when I saw his photos, I was like, nah, that's disrespectful. You're taking the piss. Your parents shouldn't have let you do that, they should have, even though he was an adult at the time, I think, like, they should have just been like, no, you're not publishing these. We're cutting you off financially if you publish this shit. It's so disrespectful to actual photographers. It's just appalling. Really, that's the worst example I can think of it by a mile, and most of it is not like that. But anyway, yeah, I thought the phone had died. It was because the battery was low, so the screen went dark, so I stopped. But yeah, I mean, for myself, like, yeah, I've now kind of accepted that for me there's no point being bitter about people who, for example, can like buy their way into everything, because I know that, I mean, even someone, to be honest, who lives like in a Western country in the developed world and is poor, even someone, for example, like there's certain privileges I have, like I said, I know I'll never be homeless. Like I can take more risks in life because I'm not going to end up literally like on the street. That's just not possible for me. So I can take more risks in that sense. I don't necessarily have to worry so much about like, where's my next meal going to come from, or whatever, or what's my rock bottom, you know, because it wouldn't be that bad. It doesn't mean I can just be like bankrolled, and even if I could, I wouldn't want to be. But I'm a million times luckier than someone anyway who's like in a third world country or something, who's got some talent, and they don't even have the time of day to like contemplate it, because they're spending, you know, 16, 17 hours a day just trying to get stuff to eat. Like, so all of us really, even the comparatively sort of unfortunate ones who have less financial mobility, are way luckier, and are very lucky to be in that situation, to, you know, to even have a few hours a day to sit in a comfy chair and practice your songs or whatever, even if no one's ever going to hear them and you're never going to have the money to move to a big city or whatever else. We're still in like the top, you know, sort of 10% in terms of the opportunities that we have. So there's no point, I don't think. I think saying, you know, to some degree we're kind of all nepo babies, even those of us, even if you live in a developed country in like a council flat, you know, to a guy who lives in like Mumbai or something, who wants to be a poet or an artist or something else, or make it big, we're all fucking nepo babies, you know, to them. So there's not much point hating those people, I don't think. But as I said, I do think we can find a lot of fault in the system, in the game itself, in the way things are structured, and in people who are supposed to kind of promote stuff and supposed to help like smaller artists get discovered, people who claim to be about kind of alternative music, underground music, and claim to be tastemakers and procurers and discoverers of stuff. That, I think, is a flawed system that should change. And I also think, yeah, as consumers, as listeners or whatever, I think it would be good for us and for artists if we maybe put a bit more thought into what we were listening to and looked a bit beyond the surface. I think that would be great for everybody involved. So that's all. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to explain here, and I'm kind of thinking out loud, and I'm probably, you know, haven't necessarily explained everything I wanted to explain, but I hope I got the overall idea across. And yeah, that's all. Alright guys, take care, thanks for watching.